Yeah, well, I don't really believe that we should get too much into the politics of another country. So I'm not crazy about Elon Musk intervening, let's say, in the German election right now, in a pretty visible way, especially because I call him kind of our prime minister. Actually, he's so influential in the new Trump administration that his intervention in German politics right now carries a lot of weight. He's not only the richest person in the world, not only sending spaceships up, not only building all sorts of amazing things, by the way, but he's politically very powerful right now. So I know him. We have a friendly relationship, but I haven't talked to him about this. I don't really know what he has in mind on this. My general advice is let the elections go on among the German people and the German voters, and don't intervene.
So are you scared of his influence, or are you looking positive about it?
Well, it's a very weird time in general in the world, but in the United States, at the inauguration, I think there were 10 tech giants with a combined net worth of $2 trillion or something absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, that's not healthy for society, actually. What happened in the United States is we really became a plutocracy. Over the last 40 years, our Supreme Court, which oversaw decisions about our election law, kept eliminating any limits on giving by corporations or by the super rich. And the Supreme Court made a really stupid argument, in my view. They said, well, this is just free speech, and it won't corrupt politics. Are you kidding? If you have billionaires that are giving huge amounts of money to politicians, you don't think that that corrupts politics? Of course it does. So the U.S. political system became deeply corrupt, but in its genius, in quotation marks, it's all legal. It's not illegal corruption, it's legal corruption. But it made the U.S. a plutocracy, meaning for both political parties, the main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, they both look to their billionaire donors for what they're going to do. And, you know, most of us are not billionaires. And we're looking at this and saying, huh? This is how government is now. It's not good. You asked, am I worried about it? Very worried about it.
So thank you very much, Jeffrey Sachs, for this answer. And just to explain you, we have more than one student here. We have altogether, I think, 6 or 7. So they're going to swap seats. And now we have the next student here. What's your name?
Mika.
Okay, Mika, you also brought a question for Jeffrey Sachs for this discussion. What do you want to know?
All right. Hello, Mr. Sachs. So I wanted to know, during your time as a UN advisor, what were like examples of advices that you gave that you feel very proud of looking back, but also the other way around? So what are advices that you gave or misconceptions that you made that you feel when you look back that you probably shouldn't have given?
Yeah, when you're in the activity of giving advice, there's one thing that is a basic thing that most of the time you're ignored. So it's a very interesting activity because sometimes you get listened to, often you get ignored. And probably I've had some good luck with being heard and being proud of the outcome. I spent a lot of time on the 2 big development goals of the UN during the last 25 years, the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I helped work on both of them with the Secretary General of the UN. So I'm very proud of that work. And one thing that I'm especially proud of is trying to solve a particular problem in a practical way. An issue that 20 years ago was very urgent was that three big diseases at the time, malaria, TB, and HIV/AIDS, were just running completely out of control. And I made a recommendation to establish a new global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And Kofi Annan thought that was a splendid idea, and he was a genius as a diplomat, and he convinced George Bush, the president at the time, to adopt the idea, and suddenly this thing became real, and it has saved, by one count, tens of millions of lives. So I'm very, very proud of that. A lot of time I'm frustrated in terms of what I got wrong. Gosh, I have to think about that. It's the main thing you want when you're trying to solve problems is actually for something to happen. So when something doesn't happen, maybe in all of those occasions you ask, could I have been more practical? Could I have done something politically better? Is there something that I missed? So that kind of feeling, that's pretty much on a lot of issues that I've worked on. And I look back and I say, yeah, I didn't really understand the politics that was at play exactly right. And so I thought something was going to happen, but it didn't happen. So that's pretty much goes with the territory.
Do you have anything like concrete where you felt the way you just described? Just a concrete situation?
You know, one of the things that I spent a lot of time working on that is very real issue now, that I've also spent a lot of time reflecting on, is what happened with the period of Russia's reforms in the early 1990s, because I was very much involved with those when President Mikhail Gorbachev was trying to make reforms in the early 1990s before the end of the Soviet Union. I worked with his economic team. And then when the Soviet Union ended and Russia and the other countries became independent, I worked with Boris Yeltsin's economic team. And it was a very difficult period. And most of what I advised was completely ignored. But one thing in particular that was a very major part of my advice was I was trying to get Europe and the United States interested in helping the Soviet Union and then helping Russia financially. And it didn't work. They weren't interested. And I never understood at that time, 30 years ago, why wouldn't you help? 30 years later, I understand a lot better. My government, the US government, was really nasty. It still viewed Russia as an enemy. Even back in the early 1990s, when Russia was a new independent country wanting to be a democracy, wanting to be part of a partnership with Europe and the US, and the US still viewed Russia as an enemy. So that's a period that I think about a lot, because a lot went wrong in those years that shouldn't have gone wrong. And it cast a shadow for a long time afterwards. And we have a war now, which was unimaginable 30 years ago, by the way, because the entire mood in Russia was, we want peace, we want friendship. And I think the United States never really wanted that or understood the opportunity. So that was a period that I think a lot about.
Thank you very much. And while we swapped the chair on my left side to the next student, I would like to show the audience what book we have here. This is also a reason why Jeffrey Sachs is here at Western Verlag. It's called in German Diplomatie oder Desaster. Zeitenwende in den USA, ist Frieden möglich? Which is translated, I do that kind of freestyle now. Diplomacy or disaster. A big change of time in the US, is peace possible? This is the subtitle of this very great book, and I really recommend it. Everybody who speaks German should really have a look in this book. So
I recommend it too because of one thing. We have to learn diplomacy again.
And that's
the whole point of this book, which is talk to each other. Not just make armaments, make war, we have to escalate, they're evil, but talk to each other. And we forgot that.
And maybe we have some future diplomats sitting here asking questions to a great US economist. So what's your name? And maybe you also say one little sentence about the school that you're from, because we haven't talked about that yet, the Filipinum, maybe just the place and maybe around how many students there are in your class.
My name is Nicholas. I'm from the Gymnasium Filipinum, as we will call it in German. Our school has roundabout, I would say, 1,000 students. And in our German class, from which we are here, we are about, let's say, 25 or 26 students. And we have this partnership with this place here, with the Verlag, I don't know the name.
Publishing company.
Publishing company, West End. And we are thankful for the opportunity to speak to you, Mr. Sachs.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to ask you about a recent comment former President Joe Biden made in his farewell speech. In his speech, he warned the American public about the emergence of a new tech oligarchy in the United States. What is your opinion about this comment?
Yeah, it's one of the few sensible things Joe Biden said during his presidency. And it's a shame that it takes the farewell speech to say something sensible. By the way, it's interesting. The most famous, there are two famous farewell speeches in American history. One is George Washington's farewell speech, and he warned America against foreign entanglements. So he said, stay out of European politics, too complicated, too many wars, and we should just stand clear.
When was this? Excuse me?
That would have been probably 1796.
Incredible.
If I remember correctly.
He was really like prophetic a little bit.
Yes. Well, he was our first president, and he was a good one. Then the other really famous farewell speech was on January 17th, 1961, which was the speech of Dwight Eisenhower. And he warned against what he called the military-industrial complex. So that's the predecessor to Biden's warning. Again, what's interesting about Eisenhower is he was a general, of course. Then he became president in 1952. And he presided over the growth of the military-industrial complex. And then with 3 days left in his term, he warned us about it. And so maybe he could have warned us about it earlier. But he had a very... He had a very, I think, unlikable, unskilled, or how should I put it, nasty foreign secretary, essentially, who was our Secretary of State, named John Foster Dulles, who was an ardent anti-communist who built up a lot of the military-industrial complex and during Eisenhower's period. And then Eisenhower gave the warning, and Eisenhower's warning was very important. It's true. I quote it all the time. Americans quote it all the time. Now, Biden is saying we have a military technology complex and these mega powerful elites. We all know one of them, Elon Musk, who is really rich, really powerful, and an engineering genius, but now sitting at the center of power and worth about $450 billion today as a person. So this is something dangerous for society, that there's so much power concentrated in such few hands. Did Biden do much to address this during his presidency? Not at all. Biden wasted his presidency. He wasted his presidency on war, which I give him a lot of blame for, both Ukraine and in the Middle East, the war in Gaza of Israel, instead of diplomacy, because in my opinion, both wars could have been ended at the negotiating table quickly, and should have been, rather than with so much violence and so much killing continuing to this day. And because the wars continued, it raised the power of these elites. Because if you look at our tech industry, of course it's doing many amazing technological advances, no doubt, but it's also very deeply tied to the Pentagon. These are big contracts going from the Pentagon to Meta, or going from the Pentagon to Amazon Cloud Services, or to Microsoft. They're all intermeshed. And so this is a kind of military tech complex with a lot of very powerful people, a lot of money in the US political system. And the American people are kind of spectators watching this amazing spectacle, and not, I think for a lot of Americans, they don't feel that the political system really responds to them at all. So even if they support Trump and are happy that he got elected, most people feel that the politicians are off in their own game and not really listening to the public.
In my opinion, he made a good choice by appointing Lina Khan as the FTC chairwoman. Would you agree with this opinion? And what else, in your opinion, should he have done to mitigate the damage that has been done by the oligarchy, or to maybe reverse the trend of a growing oligarchy in the United States?
Yeah, there are two big issues with the plutocracy, with the government by money. First is, the more the US government is like an imperium, the more it is a military state, the more out of control the government is. And the US government, in my view, is to a very significant extent a war state. The US is at war all the time. It's at war in Ukraine. It's at war in the Middle East. Of course, maybe it's not American soldiers, but believe me, it's American missiles, it's American financing, it's American intelligence, it's a lot of American personnel on the ground, even though maybe not in uniform. So these are, to an important extent, American wars. When you're perpetually at war, the government is secret. Things are confidential. There's no public oversight over war policy. And so you lose the fiber of democracy. You lose even the habit of democracy. They don't ask our opinion. One day we read, okay, Biden approved firing missiles deep into Russia. This was a couple of months ago. This was after many months where the Pentagon said, no, that's too dangerous. That could lead to a big escalation and so forth. And then the reverse decision was made. when it was made, there was no consultation in our Congress, like the Bundestag, but the U.S. Congress, none at all. There was no public debate. There was no explanation. There was no speech by the president. We don't even know whether Biden could give such a speech exactly right now because he's not in such great shape. But in any event, it was a decision completely of a kind of war cabinet, or not even cabinet, of somebody. I don't know if Jake Sullivan signed it or Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, or we don't know where these decisions come from, but they don't come democratically. So this is one risk that I feel. And of course, in Roman history, as I'm sure you've all studied at length, there was a republic and it became an empire. And the senators still walked around in their togas, but they had no power afterwards. And that, I feel, has essentially happened to the United States, that we went from a republic to an empire, and I don't like it. It has meant perpetual war and a loss of accountability. The second thing that happened, I mentioned, is more and more money in our politics. And the wealthy have become so wealthy, it's unimaginable. I mean, who dreamt that one person would have $450 billion of net worth? You can get by just with $1 billion, by the way. You know, you don't need $450 billion. But we have many, I had to even look up the word, I didn't realize it's now in common use, centibillionaires, meaning that you have $100 billion or more. We have many of them now. Come on. They could pay some taxes. They could help solve some social problems more, and so on. And this tendency is still continuing. And that, of course, dramatically diminishes the sense of rule of law institutions and democratic institutions. I don't know if you've studied Aristotle and the Politics, but that's, to my mind, the best book of political science ever written, and it was written 2,300 years ago. And he said, don't allow the inequality to become so big because your government, your society won't function. And that's what's happening to the U.S. right now.